Hello and welcome to Dead Woman's Ditch, which sounds like a bit of a macabre place to be, but there is a good reason why I'm here, and that is because I'm going to be giving a talk at the wonderful Shoot Festival all about my novel, The Last Broomsquire, which I wrote 25 years ago. The whole novel is about this area, which is in the Quantocks, and particularly it's based on this story, which occurred right here, Dead Woman's Ditch, where a bloke called John Walford murdered his wife. And he did throw her body into a ditch somewhere up here, probably this one, which is on the very top of the Quantocks. Now, the thing is, I wrote that novel all those years ago because many years before that, my old editor at the West Somerset Free Press newspaper told me the story about John Walford. The story was that when they came to hang Johnny Walford for the murder, one story was that they brought him up here to the nearest oak tree. When the sort of militia with the cart, the caged cart carrying John Walford, reached near the Stowe, the people of that village they loved him so much and they disliked his wife a lot. And so they sort of rioted. They turned up at the edge of the village with pitchforks and what have you and said, "You can't have our boy." And then there was a bit of a standoff. And eventually the captain of the guard, he said, "Look, we're going to have to do this, and if you stop us, you're all going to get hanged, so you're all going to be in trouble. Why not give Johnny a last lunch in the George Inn, and then we'll take him up and hang him." And so, to sort of save face, the village agreed to that, and old Jack Hurley, the editor of the paper, told me this story that he'd researched, and he said that all the people the village were crowded round the pub, and inside it went completely dark because they were all pressed up against the windows, and John Walford sat in there and indeed drank his cider and ate his lunch and eventually said he was ready. And then they brought him up here to Walford's Oak, just over there, where they did the dirty deed. And anyway, he's standing there and they said, "Do you have one last wish?" And he said he did, and the wish was that he wanted his childhood lover, the woman he'd loved all his life, one Anne Rice, to be brought to him so he could say a final goodbye to her. And the story goes that she was indeed brought down through the crowd, and she sort of was lifted up onto the cart at his feet, where she sort of almost fell into a swoon. John Walford bent down and whispered something into her ear, and then eventually he stood up and said he was ready. But while he was whispering into her ear, apparently the hush was so profound, the crowd didn't make a noise, you could hear a pin drop, that even the birds stopped singing in the trees, and the little stream just over there stopped tinkling in its riverbed. It was totally silent. It was one of those sort of metaphysically weird moments. So that when I was young, a young reporter, 17 years old, and Jack Hurley told me that story, I was pretty amazed by the visual imagery of it all. And then, of course, I was to learn that the poets Coleridge and Wordsworth were walking around these hills at the time. And then I also learned that a guy called Squire Cross, who lived a few miles in that direction, had a big manor house there. He was experimenting in electricity and something went wrong, and he discovered little sort of creatures had grown overnight in his old Leyden jars, which are sort of an early form of battery. And he thought, well, blimey, what have I done? Have I created life here somehow? Anyway, he gave lectures about that and lots of people in the British press at the time really derided him for saying such things. But one person who attended one of his lectures was Mary Shelley, who very shortly after that went on to write Frankenstein. So the point was that you had this one thin set of hills called the Quantocks, but in these few years you had all these incredible things happening, which sort of to me was an incredible thing. And I thought, well, how about if I sort of took John Walford as a central character and told his story about how he arrived at killing his wife, and then wove in Coleridge and Wordsworth and wove in Squire Cross, and there's a novel. Well, there could be a novel. So that's what I did, and that is The Last Broomsquire.